Jake Halden had seen strange things in his life, but nothing like what happened that night on the edge of the new. Arizona Colony, the sky was dark and silent above. A small garage where he repaired cargo haulers and old rover bikes. The air smelled of oil and metal, and the only sounds were the faint hum of his tools cooling down after a long day. He was about to lock up when a sudden flicker of light caught his eye. He looked out through the dusty window and froze. A small craft unlike any human design was lowering itself onto the dirt road outside. No engines roared. No lights flashed, it simply floated down and settled with a soft thud. The hairs on the back of his neck rose.
Ow!
This was not normal. Jake stepped outside, slowly wiping his hands on a rag. The craft was no bigger than a shuttle, but its surface shimmered like moving water and the air around it seemed to bend. It made no sound and no one came out. Instead, a small rectangular crate slid down a ramp onto the ground. The crate was smooth and silver with strange flowing symbols carved into it. The ramp pulled back, and without a single blast of thrusters, the craft rose again, tilting up and vanishing into the night sky. In complete silence, Jake stood alone. In the cool desert air, staring at the crate, his gut told him to leave it alone. His curiosity told him otherwise. He crouched down and touched the crate. It was warm not from the desert heat, but from something inside. A faint hum vibrated through his fingers. He could feel the tiniest rhythm, like breathing. The symbols pulsed with faint blue light, as if responding to his touch. For a moment he considered calling colony security, but then he remembered how slow and careless they could be. If this was valuable, they would take it, and he would never know the truth. With a deep breath, he carried it inside and set it on his workbench. Jake grabbed a pry tool and worked it into the edges of the lid. The moment he popped the first seal, a thin wisp of vapor hissed out. The lid lifted on its own with a soft hiss, revealing something small curled up inside. At first glance, it looked like a ball of fur with oversized ears and big, glassy eyes that blinked slowly in the workshop light. The creature tilted its head and made a soft chirping sound, so gentle that Jake almost smiled. It was undeniably cute in the way small animals could be.
Oh.
But there was something else. Something behind those eyes that made his stomach twist. The creature stretched and hopped lightly out of the crate, landing with perfect balance on the bench. It was no bigger than a house cat, and its fur shifted in color, from brown to soft silver, depending on how the light hit it. Its long tail swayed side to side in slow, deliberate movements. Jake reached out his hand, and it leaned forward, sniffing his fingers before letting out another small chirp. It didn't seem afraid. In fact, it seemed to be studying him just as much as he was studying it. Jake turned the collar around its neck. The metal was dark and smooth, with the same alien writing as the crate. No buttons, no clasps. It was as if the collar had grown directly onto the creature. He pulled out a scanner from his drawer, but the device sputtered and shut down the moment he pointed it at the creature. The lights in the garage flickered for a second. Jake frowned.
Ow.
This thing was doing something to the electronics. He took a step back suddenly, unsure if bringing it inside had been a good idea. The creature tilted its head again, and Jake thought he saw a faint glow deep in its pupils. Not the reflection of light, but an actual shimmer, like the surface of a distant star. His breath caught the room, seemed quieter than before. The hum of the fans had faded, and he could hear only the faint sound of his own heartbeat. Then, without moving its mouth, the creature spoke. A voice clear and calm echoed in his mind. "You are my new host." Jake's staggered back, nearly knocking over a stool. His eyes darted around the workshop, but there was no one else there. He stared at the creature, its innocent eyes unblinking. His hands felt cold and his mouth went dry. The voice came again inside his skull, steady and certain. "You will keep me safe. I will keep you alive." Jake didn't know what to say, didn't even know if speaking out loud would work. He opened his mouth, but before he could make a sound, movement outside caught his attention. Through the small window, he saw shapes standing just beyond the reach of the street lamp, shadows tall and thin, cloaked in something that made them blur at the edges. He couldn't see faces, just faint glints where eyes should be. They were watching the garage unmoving. His chest tightened. The creature turned its head. toward the window and made a low sound, nothing like the sweet chirps from before it was a warning. The figures outside stepped back, melting into the darkness without a sound. Jake turned back to the creature. It sat perfectly still on the bench, its tail curling around its feet. The faint glow in its eyes pulsed once, then faded back to normal. He realized then that this was no lost pet. No harmless animal dropped off by accident. Whatever it was had been left here for a reason, and whoever left it was still close enough to watch what he would do next. His instincts screamed at him to get rid of it. But deep down he knew, the moment he saw those glowing eyes, that it was already too late. Jake barely slept that night. Every creak of the garage made him glance at the shadows. Every hum of the old cooling fans made him think of the strange crate and the even stranger creature now curled up on his workbench. The little thing looked peaceful, almost harmless as it slept, its chest rising and falling in slow rhythm, but Jake could not forget the way it had spoken inside. His head, or the way it had warned him about the figures outside his mind, kept circling the same question: was it protecting him, or was it using him? When the first pale light of morning slipped through the dusty window, Jake found the creature already awake, sitting perfectly still and watching him. Its silver-brown fur shimmered faintly in the sunlight, and its eyes followed every move he made. He poured himself a mug of stale coffee and kept glancing at it as he sipped. The creature tilted its head and chirped softly as if to remind him it was still there. The sound was almost friendly, almost. He decided to start with the collar. The alien markings were smooth and seamless, no visible lock or seam. When he tried to touch it, the metal felt warmer than the creature's fur, almost alive. He brought over his old translator module, the one he'd used for decoding off-world repair manuals. As soon as the scanner's beam hit the collar, it sparked violently and shut down. The faint scent of burning circuits filled the air. Jake swore under his breath that was the second piece of tech it had killed without touching it. The creature hopped down from the bench and padded across the garage floor, tail swaying slowly. Jake watched it move, noticing how fluid its steps were. Too precise for an animal that small. It stopped beside his open toolbox, and without looking, reached one tiny paw inside. Moments later, the rusty drone controller he had tossed in there last month began to hum. The lights on its surface flickered to life. Jake stepped forward in disbelief. The thing was fixing it without even opening it up. He realized it wasn't just repairing the controller, it was rewriting it. Before he could say anything, a chime echoed from his old Wacom. A message flickered on the cracked display. No ID, no source, just for words if it bonds. Run now? Jake's pulse quickened. He turned toward the creature. It was watching him again, but this time there was something in its gaze, an awareness that made his skin prickle. He thought about the voice in his head. Last night, the promise to keep him alive. Was that a warning or a threat? By midday, a shadow passed over the garage. Jake stepped outside into the hot colony air and saw it. A sleek black vessel drifting low overhead. It wasn't one of theirs. He had seen similar shapes in news footage from the frontier border. The Varric, the name alone was enough to make people lower their voices. They were advanced, dangerous, and rumored to use living weapons. No one on New Arizona wanted them anywhere near their homes. The ship circled, once slowly, as if marking his location, then glided out toward the dunes. When Jake stepped back inside, the creature was no longer on the bench. He found it perched on the top shelf of the parts rack, claws hooked lightly into the metal. It made no sound as it stared down at him. Jake reached up to move it, but froze when the voice came again inside his skull. They will come for me. They will come for you. His hand trembled. He didn't like the way it said "for you," as if they were linked in some way he could not escape. That night, Jake decided to test it. He set up an old security drone in the corner to watch the garage and went to bed in the small loft above. The hum of the cooling fans and the soft creaks of the old walls almost lulled him to sleep until the sound of metal snapping jolted him awake. He slid down the ladder silently. The security drone was offline, its camera shattered. Lying on the floor beside it was something worse, a body not human, tall, thin, gray skin ridged along the arms. A Varric scout. The creature stood over it, its eyes no longer soft but blazing with an unnatural white light. Blood, dark and unfamiliar, dripped from its claws. Jake's stomach turned. The scout's throat had been torn open, and its weapon lay discarded nearby. The creature looked up at him, and the glow faded instantly, fur shifting back to its harmless silver brown. It chirped again softly, almost sweetly, as if nothing had happened. Jake stared at it, trying to see it as just A small alien animal again, but the image of the dead scout burned in his mind. Whatever it was, it had just killed without hesitation and without a sound. And somewhere out there, others would know exactly where to find it, and now they would know where to find him. Jake didn't bother pretending the next morning was normal. The body of the Varric scout was gone. He had dragged it out to the edge of the dunes before sunrise, burying it deep in loose sand, where no one from the colony would find it but While the creature sat on a nearby rock watching him, its tail curling and uncurling in slow rhythm, as if it knew exactly what he was thinking. He kept reminding himself that hiding a Varric body was the kind of thing that could get him executed under colonial law, yet somehow leaving it there felt even more dangerous. If the authorities got involved, they would take the creature away, and whatever it was hiding would be unleashed somewhere else. By midday, Jake heard the sound of approaching footsteps outside. He looked out the narrow garage window and saw two people walking toward him. A man and a woman dressed in clean civilian clothes but moving with the precision of trained soldiers. They smiled as if they were lost travelers, but Jake had seen that kind of smile before. It didn't reach their eyes. The man raised a hand in a friendly wave and called out, "We heard you might have found something unusual last night. Mind if we take a look?" His tone was casual, but the slight bulge under his jacket told Jake he was carrying something far from friendly. Jake stepped out onto the dusty road, keeping his weight on the balls of his feet. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said flatly. The woman's eyes narrowed. "Just slightly. We're willing to make it worth your time," she said. Her hand dipped into a pocket and came out holding a small black card, the kind used for high-value transfers. The amount displayed made Jake's breath catch. He could live comfortably for 10 years on that much. He didn't look at it for long. Instead, he shook his head. "Not interested." The man's smile thinned. "Think carefully, mechanic. Some things are dangerous to keep around." He leaned in just enough for Jake to smell the faint metallic temps of alien synth oil on his clothes, the kind Varric soldiers used. Jake didn't answer. He stepped back into the doorway and, without looking, signaled the creature with a quick flick of his hand. The two strangers exchanged a glance, then slowly turned away, walking back toward the road. Neither of them looked over their shoulder, but Jake knew they would be back, and next time they wouldn't bother smiling. When he closed the door, the creature hopped onto the bench and stared at him with unblinking eyes. This time the voice in his head was sharper, more urgent. "I chose you, not them. They will not stop." Jake rubbed his temples. "Why me?" he muttered out loud. "Why here?" The answer came like a cold ripple through his skull. "You fix things, you survive. That is enough." He didn't like the sound of that. As if his only value was to keep this thing alive long enough for whatever came next. The rest of the day passed in tense silence until the come on the wall beeped again. This time the source was his friend Lena from Colony Security. She spoke fast, low, and with an edge of fear. "Jake, lock your doors right now. I ran a scan on the Varric ship. It's not just passing by, they're hunting for a biolink unit. If they find it, they'll take the host to." Jake froze, staring at the creature. "And what happens to the host?" he asked. Quietly, Lena's silence was answer enough. That night, the garage felt colder than usual. Jake kept checking the shadows as he worked on sealing every entrance. Pip, as he had started calling it, padded around the workshop, inspecting his work. Its glowing eyes seemed to linger on the weak spots, as if mapping them out. Jake tried to sleep in the loft again, but the moment he closed his eyes, his mind filled with flashes. Not dreams, but visions. Pip was showing him alien landscapes. Ships burning in orbit and swarms of soldiers in armor, unlike anything humans had built then. A final image, a massive Varric warship above New Arizona Colony, dropping fire into the streets. Jake woke with a jolt, heart pounding. Pip sat at the foot of the bed watching him. The voice came again, softer. "This time they will come soon. I will prepare you." He didn't ask what that meant. Instead, he climbed down, grabbed his jacket, and started packing supplies. If the Varric wanted both of them, they'd have to fight for it. What Jake didn't know was that the fight would start far sooner than he expected, because as he stepped outside for air, he saw a shadow detach from the far wall of the garage and move toward him without a sound. The shadow moved with an unnatural grace, each step silent against the dusty ground. Jake's hand went instinctively to the wrench on his belt. But before he could even lift it, the figure was inside the garage. The door hadn't even creaked open. It was just suddenly there, tall, thin, and armored, in a dull black material that seemed to absorb the light. A Varric hunter-killer, the kind used only when a target had become too much of a problem. Its helmet turned toward Jake, and for a moment, he saw his own reflection in the featureless black visor. The voice inside his head wasn't his own. Pip's words were sharp and urgent. "Move now, Jake." Dove behind the workbench just as a thin burst of blue plasma seared through the air where he'd been standing. The smell of scorched metal filled the garage. Pip leapt from the shelf with impossible speed, landing on the hunter-killer's back, claws digging into the armor. The alien staggered only for a moment before grabbing Pip and hurling it across the room. Pip landed on all fours, unharmed, eyes blazing white. Jake grabbed the old me charge from the drawer, slamming it onto the floor. Switch pressed down. The pulse ripped through the room, making his ears ring. The hunter-killer stumbled as parts of its armor flickered, but it didn't fall. Instead, it turned on Jake with deliberate steps. Weapons resetting. Pip's voice cut through the static in his mind. Bond now or die. Before he could ask what that meant, Pip sprang onto his chest, claws gripping but not cutting. A sudden burning cold spread through him from the point of contact, and his vision flared white. He gasped as every sound in the garage sharpened, every shadow defined. He could feel Pip in his mind, not as a voice, but as a presence moving alongside his own thoughts. He knew exactly where the hunter-killer's weak points were without being told. His body felt lighter, faster. The alien fired again, but Jake moved before the shot was even triggered, rolling across the floor and coming up with the wrench in his hand. He swung hard, hitting the joint of the alien's knee. The armor cracked. Pip fed him a rush of instinct, and he struck again in the same spot. The hunter-killer collapsed to one side, and Pip darted forward, its claws finding the exposed joint in the neck. The alien went still in seconds. The sudden silence felt deafening. Dropped to his knees, breathing hard, his muscles still buzzed with energy, but his thoughts were clearer than they had ever been. Pip stepped back from the corpse, eyes dimming to their softer glow. "The bond is made now. You cannot be separated." Jake wiped the sweat from his forehead. "What did you just do to me?" The answer came without hesitation. "Made you ready." In the days that followed, Jake realized the bond had changed more than his reflexes. He could lift heavier tools with ease, move with precision he had never trained for. Even his aim with a welding torch was sharper. Pip explained in fragments that the Varric wanted it to complete their own mech integration program. They planned to use creatures like Pip to turn pilots into extensions of war machines, making them faster, deadlier, and impossible to predict. That was why they had sent the hunter-killer. The Varric did not like losing property. Jake spent hours training with Pip's guidance, practicing movements, dodging attacks from small drones, and striking back with perfect timing. It wasn't just physical. Pip was teaching him how to read battlefield patterns the way a predator sees a herd's weakest point, but all the while Pip kept glancing toward the sky as if counting down to something. Jake finally asked how long they had before the next attack. Pip's answer was simple: not long enough. That night a transmission crackled through the comm panel. A scrambled Varric voice spoke in a language Jake couldn't understand, but the meaning flowed into his head through Pip's translation. "Return the unit, or the colony burns." Pip's eyes flashed in the dark, and Jake felt the same pulse of anger in his own chest, as if it were his own emotion. The Varric weren't just coming for Pip now. They were coming for him and everyone else in New Arizona. Kalino outside in the distance he could see faint streaks of light in the upper atmosphere ships maneuvering far above the colony's protective grid. The invasion had already begun. The faint streaks of light above the colony grew brighter with each passing hour. Jake knew the Varric weren't going to wait for negotiations or subtlety. This time they were coming to end it quickly. Pip stood on the workbench, watching the sky. Through the grimy garage window, tail twitching in precise rhythm every few seconds, Jake felt small flashes in his mind like a warning pulse. Pip was mapping their approach ships, marking their landing zones. In his thoughts he could almost see it, all like a hologram burned into the back of his eyes. Jake had two choices: run and hope the colony security could handle the fight, or stand his ground. He didn't even consider the first option. Running meant leaving Pip in Varric hands, and leaving the colony to burn. Pip seemed to sense the decision before he made it. The voice in his head was calm, but there was a sharp edge this time. We make them come to us. Jake looked around the cluttered garage and started pulling tools from every shelf. Welding torches, arc cutters, EMP coils, even old scrap plating from jobs he had never finished. If they wanted a fight, they would get one right here. Through the night they worked together, Jake's hands moving with a speed that felt almost unnatural. As Pip guided him, they turned the garage into a layered trap, tripwire charges hidden in tool crates, EMP mines disguised as spare power cells. Walls reinforced with metal sheets and reinforced bolts. Pip even hacked into the colony's old power grid, rerouting extra current into the floor plating beneath the main entrance. Anyone stepping inside without the right path would get enough voltage to shut down even a hunter-killer. By the time the first hint of dawn lit the horizon, the garage looked no different from the outside, but inside, it was a killing ground. The first sign they were coming was silence. The morning sounds of the colony faded away. No rovers rumbling down the road. No workers talking over breakfast. Even the air felt still. Then the shadow of a Varric shuttle slid over the garage, blocking the sunlight. Jake crouched low behind the reinforced counter. Pip was at his side, fur-bristling eyes glowing with cold light. The shuttle didn't land right away. Instead, it released three figures who dropped into the dust without a sound. Hunter-killers. Moving in perfect formation, they advanced toward the door without hesitation the moment the first stepped through. Jake triggered the voltage plate. A sharp crack filled the air as the alien's armor sparked and locked. The second stepped forward to pull it back and set off a hidden EMP charge. Both froze in place long enough for Jake to throw a scrap metal shield over the entrance. The third tried to leap through the side window, only to trip the tripwire charge that sent it slamming into the wall. The fight wasn't clean, but it was quick. The traps bought just enough time for Jake and Pip to finish the rest with precision strikes guided by the Bond one. Of the hunter-killers lay barely alive, its breathing shallow but steady. Pip's voice was cold in Jake's mind. Ask it the date. Jake crouched over the alien, pressing a welding torch close to its helmet. When is the invasion? At first the alien stayed silent, but when Pip pressed a claw into the weakened armor at its neck, it spoke in a low rasp. The words were Varric, but Pip translated instantly. Less than 1 day. They are already here. Orbiting. Jake felt the weight of the truth hit him. The garage traps had worked, but this was only the first wave. The real attack would come from above, with hundreds, maybe thousands of troops. Pip's eyes met his, and the thought came through clear. We cannot stop them alone. Jake knew what had to be done. He moved to the COM unit and began sending out an encrypted burst signal to the only people crazy enough to answer. Old human Warfleet veterans scattered across the fringe worlds. If even a few of them came, they might have a chancers. Later, as the sun dipped low behind the colony ridge, the sky flashed with the unmistakable streak of incoming vessels. But these weren't Varric. They were human warships, painted in faded colors from old battles long forgotten. Jake's signal had reached them, and they were coming in fast. Pip stood beside him on the roof of the garage, watching the horizon. The bond between them pulsed once in steady resolve. The Varric thought they had cornered their prey. Instead, Jake had just baited the trap on a scale they never expected. The real fight was about to begin. The first human warships broke through the cloud layer. Like thunder made of steel, their engines roared across the colony sky, and the sound alone made Jake's chest tighten with something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The Varric ships shifted position in orbit, their sleek black hulls glinting against the sunlight as they moved to intercept. It didn't matter. The humans weren't here to negotiate. They were here to fight. On the roof of the garage, Jake adjusted the straps of the old combat harness Pip had modified for him. Every movement felt sharper, more exact, as if his body and mind were already synced to the battle. Pip's fur shimmered in the light, its eyes glowing like twin beacons. The voice in Jake's head was calm, but unshakably certain. We end this now. The first dropships from the Varric broke atmosphere, streaking toward the colony like falling knives. Human anti-air batteries hidden in the outskirts opened fire, filling the sky with bursts of molten light. Ships exploded mid-descent, scattering debris across the desert. The rest made it through, landing hard and deploying squads of armored soldiers who fanned out with inhuman speed. Jake didn't wait. He and Pip dropped from the roof and sprinted toward the open yard where an old human combat mech stood, half buried in the dirt. The mech had been a dead relic for years, nothing more than a reminder of past wars, But Pip leapt into the cockpit slot on the back, and the change was instant. Lights flickered. 2 life systems hummed with power, and Jake felt the machine as if it were an extension of his own body. Every servo joint, every weapon mount responded to his thoughts as if they were muscles in his own arms. The bond had gone beyond just man and creature. Now they were a single weapon. The Varric forces hit the colony perimeter in tight formation. Their weapons cut through walls and barricades with brutal precision. Jake moved the mech forward, every step thudding like a hammer against the Earth. Plasma fire rained toward them, but Pip's targeting fed directly into his mind, allowing him to dodge with impossible timing. Every shot Jake fired hit exactly where it needed to cripple enemy armor or shatter weapons in their hands around him. The warships clashed above, streaks of light cutting the sky in half. A group of Varric broke off from the main assault, charging straight at him. One carried a heavy cannon designed to tear through mechs in a single shot. Pip's voice was sharp and fast in his thoughts. Left flank. He moved without hesitation, firing the mech's shoulder cannon and detonating the weapon before it could fire. The blast sent the rest tumbling into the dirt. Jake crushed the closest one underfoot before swinging the mech's arm through another, sending it spinning across the field. But even with the Warfleet's support, the Varric numbers kept pouring in. Pip's glow brightened until it was almost blinding, and Jake felt a sudden surge of energy in his chest. If I overload the systems, we can end this, all of them. The meaning was clear. Overloading meant the mech would destroy everything in range, but Pip would not survive the process. Jake's jaw clenched. We'll find another way. Pip's voice was softer then, but final. This is the way. The mech system screamed with rising power levels as Pip poured every fragment of its energy into the core. The heat was intense, alarms blaring, but Jake held the machine steady as the Varric forces closed in. At the last moment, Pip's voice reached him one last time. You fix things, you survive. And then the world turned white. When Jake woke, he was lying in the ruins of the garage. The mech was nothing but twisted metal and scorched earth around it. The battlefield was silent, save for the distant hum of human ships circling overhead. The Varric had retreated what little remained of their forces. Scattering into the void colony, survivors were already moving through the streets. Tending to the wounded, Jake sat up slowly, his chest aching. The space on his shoulder where Pip used to perch felt impossibly empty. But then he saw it on the workbench, somehow untouched by the chaos, sat a small egg, its surface glowing faintly. With shifting silver and brown patterns, Jake walked over and picked it up, cradling it in his hands. The glow pulsed, once warm, against his palm, and he felt the faintest echo of a familiar voice deep in his mind. Not gone, just beginning.